Good evening all, and welcome back to Verified Whispers. This photo was taken at Riverside Cemetery on Halloween night, 2018. The photographer, Aisha Patel, was completely alone, or so she thought. But when she got home and reviewed her shots, someone was there. In every single photo. A shadowy figure, barely visible at first, appearing in the background of her first shot. Then closer in the second. Even closer in the third. Each image showed this presence getting nearer and nearer, moving toward her with every click of the shutter. The final photograph made her blood run cold. It showed a figure pressed directly against her back, its face visible over her shoulder, staring into the lens. She never saw anyone, never felt a presence, never heard a sound. The next morning, she searched online and found his obituary in the local archives. A man who died in that exact cemetery 50 years earlier, on Halloween night, at 11:47 p.m., the exact timestamp on her photos. Tonight, you're about to hear 5 true Halloween horror stories that actually happened to real people, documented and investigated. And story number 3, it's still unexplained. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Verified Whispers for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Story 1. The Wrong House. Diane Russo was pinned against her kitchen counter, a teenager with a plastic machete inches from her throat, screaming, "Die, zombie bitch," as his friends laughed and filmed. But this wasn't a haunted house attraction. This was her home. And they had no idea this was real. But to understand how a mother of 2 ended up fighting for her life on Halloween night, we need to go back 3 hours. It started when Diane sent her 9-year-old daughter Emma out trick-or-treating with the neighbors' kids. She stayed home in their quiet suburban Michigan neighborhood, planning an evening of handing out candy and watching horror movies. Just another Halloween in 2021. Around 8:47 p.m., she heard her front door open. What happened next would make her question everything she thought she knew about her own home. 5 teenagers walked in, laughing and shoving each other. Diane assumed they were friends of her teenage son, until she remembered he was at his father's house that weekend. "Excuse me, what are you doing in my house?" she asked, stepping into the hallway. The teens looked at her, grinned, and one of them said, "Dude, she's really good. The makeup looks so real." She had no idea that a single viral TikTok was about to turn her night into a nightmare. They thought she was an actor, a haunted house performer. One of them pulled out a phone showing her a TikTok video with 47,000 views listing the best extreme haunted houses in Michigan, and her address was on the list. Someone had posted it by mistake, confusing her home with the actual haunted attraction 3 streets over. The teens had brought prop weapons, realistic-looking knives, fake blood, even a plastic chainsaw. Diane tried reasoning with them, then demanding they leave, but they were so convinced this was part of the show that they started playing along, getting more aggressive, more physical, treating her like she was supposed to scare them. One grabbed her arm, another pulled out the machete. "Come on, lady, really sell it," he laughed. But what happened when her daughter walked through that door changed everything. Diane heard Emma's key in the lock. The little girl walked in, wearing her princess costume, trick-or-treat bag in hand, and screamed. That scream, pure, terrified, real, finally shattered the illusion. The teenagers' faces went white as they realized what they'd done. This wasn't a performance. This was a real woman, a real child, a real home they'd invaded. One of them started crying. Another dropped the fake knife and backed toward the door. "Oh my God! Oh my God! We thought the TikTok said—" Diane grabbed Emma and ran to her bedroom, locking the door and calling 911. She could hear the teenagers panicking in her living room, their voices cracking with fear as they realized they'd just committed a felony. Police arrived within 4 minutes. The 5 teens were arrested for breaking and entering, though charges were later reduced to trespassing because of the viral TikTok mistake. Their lawyers argued they genuinely believed they were entering a public haunted attraction. The video was taken down, but not before it had been shared thousands of times. Diane moved 3 months later. She couldn't stand being in that house, couldn't shake the feeling of violation every time she walked past her kitchen counter. She never celebrated Halloween again. And sometimes, late at night, she still hears that teenager's voice in her head. Dude, she's really good. Really? Story. The candy inspection. Robert Kim stared at the petri dish under his microscope, his hands trembling. The candy compound wasn't just reacting to his daughter's DNA sample, it was organizing around it, forming crystalline structures that shouldn't be possible. And the sample had come from a house that, according to county records, didn't exist. 12 hours earlier, Robert had been doing what any careful parent does on Halloween night. As a pharmaceutical researcher, Robert routinely checked his 7-year-old daughter Sophie's Halloween candy with a UV light and basic chemical tests, a habit his colleagues called paranoid, but one he never skipped. This particular Halloween in 2022, Sophie had collected 47 pieces of candy from their Virginia neighborhood. 46 were perfectly normal. But piece number 47 would reveal something that modern science couldn't explain. It was a small, wrapped chocolate in gold foil with no brand markings. Under UV light, it glowed a faint purple. Unusual, but not alarming. Robert decided to run a spectrometer analysis just to be safe. The reading made him do it 3 more times. The chocolate contained a compound he'd never encountered in 15 years of pharmaceutical research. Not a poison, not a drug. Something completely unknown. The molecular structure didn't match anything in any database he had access to. It was organic, but unlike any organic compound he'd ever seen. What he discovered next made him call the police immediately. Robert checked Sophie's trick-or-treat map, a cute little drawing she'd made of which houses she visited. The gold-foiled candy came from 1847 Oakmont Drive. He pulled up Google Maps. There was no 1847 Oakmont Drive. The address jumped from 1845 to 1849. He thought maybe Sophie had written it down wrong, so he drove there at midnight. Between the 2 houses was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds, with a for sale sign that looked decades old. No pathway, no mailbox, no indication anyone had lived there in years. But the moment he brought his daughter's DNA into contact with the compound, everything changed. Back in his home lab, Robert's scientific curiosity got the better of him. He took a cheek swab from Sophie while she slept and placed a cell sample near the mysterious compound under his microscope. Within seconds, the substance began moving, reorganizing itself into geometric patterns, as if it recognized her genetic code. The temperature in the dish dropped 15 degrees in less than a minute. The patterns grew more complex, branching out like fractals, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost biological. Robert immediately sealed the petri dish in a containment box and called the FBI. Federal investigators arrived at his home by 4 a.m. They collected the candy, the compound samples, and Sophie's DNA sample. They interviewed Sophie, who could only describe the house as dark and quiet, with a bowl of candy left on the porch. No one had answered the door. Investigators found 23 identical candies across 3 states, Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, all wrapped in the same gold foil, all containing the same unknown compound, all distributed from addresses that didn't exist. Every single address was an empty lot, abandoned property, or non-existent number between existing houses. The investigation remains open. The compound is stored in a classified federal facility. Sophie's DNA sample was destroyed per Robert's insistence, but he kept copies of his analysis, hidden in an encrypted drive that he checks obsessively. Robert still has nightmares about those crystalline patterns, the way they moved and pulsed like they were alive, like they were searching for something in his daughter's genetic code. He never let Sophie trick or treat again. Every Halloween since 2022, they stay home with the lights off, door locked, curtains drawn. And sometimes, late at night, Robert goes down to his home lab and stares at the empty petri dish, wondering what would have happened if he hadn't tested that candy, wondering what that compound was looking for in Sophie's DNA, and terrified that somewhere out there, someone is still handing out those gold-wrapped chocolates, waiting for the right genetic match. Story 3. The Photographer. Aisha Patel's scream echoed through her apartment as she stared at the final photograph. The figure wasn't just behind her anymore. It was pressed against her back, its decayed face visible over her shoulder, hollow eyes staring directly into her camera lens. And she had been completely, utterly alone in that cemetery. 6 hours earlier, Aisha had been excited about her annual Halloween photography project. As a 26-year-old paranormal photographer with 89,000 Instagram followers, Aisha made it a tradition to shoot atmospheric photos in Riverside Cemetery every Halloween night. She'd done it for 3 years without incident. Beautiful, moody shots of tombstones and fog that her followers loved. October 31st, 2018 was supposed to be no different. She arrived at 11:30 p.m. with her professional camera, tripod, and portable lights, ready for another successful shoot. But what her camera captured would prove that some things see us, even when we can't see them. The cemetery was empty. Aisha walked the grounds for 15 minutes before setting up near the oldest section, where graves dated back to the 1860s. The air was still, cold, but not unusually so for late October. She took 12 photos over 17 minutes, adjusting angles and exposure settings, moving her tripod to different positions to capture various tombstones. She felt nothing unusual. No cold spots. No sense of being watched. No inexplicable sounds or movements. Just the quiet stillness of a cemetery at midnight and the satisfying click of her camera shutter. She packed up at 11:47 p.m. and drove home, satisfied with the night's work, already thinking about which filters she'd use for her Instagram post the next day. Then she uploaded the photos to her computer, and her blood ran cold. The first photo looked normal. A weathered tombstone bathed in moonlight, exactly what she'd framed in her viewfinder. But in the second photo, taken just 90 seconds later, from a slightly different angle, there was a dark shape in the background, barely visible. A shadow that shouldn't have been there. She zoomed in, thinking it might be a tree or monument she hadn't noticed, but the shape was wrong. Too vertical, too humanoid. In the third photo, the shape was closer. Fourth photo, closer still. By the eighth photo, she could make out a human silhouette standing approximately 20 feet behind her. Each subsequent image showed the figure moving nearer, step by step, photo by photo, following her as she moved her equipment around the cemetery. But nothing could have prepared her for what she found in the cemetery records. Aisha zoomed in on the final photo, the 12th shot she'd taken at 11:47 p.m. The figure's face was visible now, gaunt, hollow-cheeked, with sunken eyes that seemed to reflect her camera flash, despite being clearly dead. The skin appeared gray and deteriorated, stretched tight over the skull. It wore what looked like old-fashioned clothing, a dark suit from another era. And it was pressed directly against her back, so close that if it had been physically there, she would have felt its breath on her neck. Her hands shook as she stared at the image. She couldn't sleep that night. At 6 a.m., as soon as the cemetery office opened, she drove back to Riverside Cemetery and demanded to see the burial records. The groundskeeper, an elderly man named Harold, seemed unsurprised by her distress. Apparently, she wasn't the first person to come asking questions after a late-night visit. What she discovered made her delete her entire photography account and quit the paranormal field forever. They found him, Daniel Whitmore, buried in Section 7, Plot 23, exactly where Aisha had been standing when she took her photos. The burial plot was marked with a modest granite stone, weathered and covered in moss. Harold pulled the file from the cemetery archives. Daniel Whitmore had died on October 31st, 1968, 50 years to the day before her photo shoot. But here's what made her scream in that cemetery office, what made Harold instinctively step back and cross himself. The time of death listed on his burial certificate was 11:47 p.m., the exact timestamp on her final photograph, the exact moment when he appeared closest to her in the frame, when his decayed face was visible over her shoulder, when whatever he was had gotten as close as it could possibly get. Aisha tried to delete the photos, but they kept reappearing in her cloud storage. She deleted them from Google Photos. They came back. Deleted them from Dropbox. They reappeared. Deleted them from her hard drive and emptied the trash. 3 days later, they were back in a folder labeled Riverside Halloween 2018. She eventually hired a priest to bless her camera equipment and sold everything at a loss to a pawn shop 3 towns over. She moved to California 2 months later and now works in graphic design, refusing to touch any camera more sophisticated than her iPhone on the lowest resolution setting. She hasn't visited a cemetery since. The photos. She finally stopped them from reappearing by performing a ritual she found on a paranormal forum, printing every photo, burning them one by one in her backyard, and scattering the ashes in running water. She burned the hard drive too, watching the plastic melt and the circuits fry. But sometimes, late at night, she still checks her phone, terrified she'll see his face appearing in the background of her selfies, that hollow-eyed stare, getting closer with each picture she takes. And on October 31st every year, at exactly 11:47 p.m., her phone camera opens by itself. She never looks at what it captures. She just deletes the photo immediately and turns her phone off until November 1st. Because she knows Daniel Whitmore is still trying to get closer, still following her, still appearing in frames she can't see until it's too late. Story 4. The costume that wouldn't come off. The ER doctor's face went pale as he examined Marcus Chen's neck. "Sir, this isn't a costume. This is your skin." The plague doctor mask had fused to Marcus's face. The leather coat had become part of his flesh, and underneath, something was moving. 8 hours earlier, Marcus thought he'd found the perfect vintage Halloween costume. Marcus Chen, a 28-year-old graphic designer from Portland, loved Halloween. When he saw the plague doctor costume at an estate sale, authentic-looking leather coat, bird-beaked mask, even the leather gloves, he paid $40 without hesitation. The elderly woman selling it seemed almost relieved to get rid of it. "It belonged to my late husband," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "He only wore it once." Marcus should have asked more questions, but he was too excited about the find. But the moment he put it on, he felt something that should have made him rip it off immediately. The costume fit perfectly. Too perfectly. The leather seemed to mold to his body, warm and almost breathing against his skin. Marcus laughed it off as high-quality material, expensive craftsmanship from another era. He admired himself in the mirror of his apartment, adjusting the beaked mask, running his hands over the long leather coat. It felt alive somehow, pulsing gently with his heartbeat. He wore it to his friend's Halloween party, arriving at 9 p.m. People complimented the authenticity, asked where he'd found such an incredible costume, took photos with him. Marcus felt proud, like he'd won the night. Around 10:30 p.m., Marcus noticed the mask felt tighter, like it was shrinking. He tried to remove it in the bathroom, tugging at the straps, but they wouldn't budge. What he saw in the mirror made him realize this was no ordinary costume. Marcus stared at his reflection. His eyes looked different, darker, sunken deeper into the sockets. The skin around the mask's edges appeared to be blending with the leather, the border between flesh and costume blurring like watercolors bleeding together. He pulled harder. Pain shot through his face, sharp and burning. It felt like he was trying to tear off his own skin. The leather gloves tightened around his hands, constricting his fingers. His friend Jake knocked on the bathroom door. "Dude, you okay?" Marcus's voice came out distorted, muffled by the mask, deeper than it should have been. "I can't get it off." Jake helped him pull at the mask, at the coat, but every tug brought waves of agony. The costume wasn't just tight, it was attached. But what happened in the emergency room defied every medical explanation. Jake drove Marcus to the ER at 11:47 p.m., speeding through red lights as Marcus hyperventilated in the passenger seat, clawing at the mask that now felt like it was suffocating him. 3 nurses and 2 doctors tried to remove the costume using scissors, scalpels, even a medical saw designed to cut through metal. Nothing worked. The scissors couldn't penetrate the leather. The scalpel slid off as if the material was coated in something slick and impenetrable. The medical saw sparked and smoked but left no mark. The leather had become organic, fused with Marcus's epidermis at a cellular level that made no biological sense. X-rays showed the coat's interior lining had somehow grafted to his muscle tissue, intertwining with his own fibers. The mask had integrated with his facial structure, the beak appearing to connect with his nasal cavity, the eye holes merging with his orbital bones. "This is impossible," the lead doctor whispered, staring at the scans with trembling hands. "This violates every principle of human anatomy." Then Marcus felt something move inside the costume, and he started screaming. As medical staff debated what to do, considering whether to call in specialists from Johns Hopkins or the CDC, Marcus felt a ripple beneath the leather coat. Something was shifting underneath, like muscles contracting. But they weren't his muscles. They moved independently, writhing against his skin from the inside. He looked down at his gloved hands and watched in horror as his fingers began elongating, the leather gloves stretching with them, becoming part of the transformation. His fingernails pushed through the leather tips, growing longer, yellowing, curving into talons. The bird-beaked mask grew heavier, pulling his face downward, forcing his neck to bend. His spine curved involuntarily, hunching him forward. He was changing into whatever had worn this costume before him. Whatever the old woman's husband had become during that one time, he wore it. Marcus was transferred to a specialized medical facility in Virginia that night, a place that dealt with unexplainable biological phenomena. The transformation stopped after 72 hours, leaving him partially fused with the costume, unable to remove it, but stable enough that he wasn't dying. He lives in isolation now, in a secure wing of the facility, his face permanently concealed by the plague doctor mask that has become his face. His hands are twisted, elongated, more like claws than human appendages. The leather coat hangs on his hunched frame, indistinguishable from his own skin. He can eat through a feeding tube inserted beneath the beak. He can speak, though his voice sounds hollow and distant, like it's coming from inside a well. Security footage from the estate sale was reviewed by federal investigators. The woman who sold him the costume didn't exist. Cameras showed Marcus talking to empty air, handing $40 to no one, picking up the costume from a table that appeared empty in the footage. The address where the sale allegedly took place was an empty lot that hadn't had a structure on it for 15 years. And when investigators contacted the family who actually lived at the address Marcus had written down, they said no estate sale had ever taken place, and no elderly woman matching his description had ever lived there. Marcus receives monthly medical evaluations, but doctors have stopped trying to remove the costume. They're afraid of what they might find underneath, afraid that the man named Marcus Chen doesn't exist anymore, that there's only the plague doctor now. And sometimes, late at night, the staff hear him talking to someone in his room, having conversations in a language no one recognizes, his voice alternating between his own and something much older, something that wore that costume long before Marcus ever found it. At a sale that never happened. Story 5. The Last Hayride. Tyler Morrison stood in the center of the corn maze, surrounded by 23 cell phones, arranged in a perfect circle, all still recording. Their owners, a group of 7 college students, were unconscious in the dirt, positioned like spokes on a wheel. They'd been missing for 3 hours, and carved into every cornstalk surrounding them were symbols Tyler had seen before, in a book about the 1872 harvest disappearances. 12 hours earlier, Tyler was just looking forward to finishing his last shift of the Halloween season. Tyler Morrison, 19, worked seasonal shifts at Blackwood Farms, a family-owned corn maze and hayride attraction in rural Ohio. Halloween night 2120 was supposed to be the final night of operation before winter. The farm had been in the Blackwood family since 1847, sitting on 200 acres of land that locals whispered about. Old land with old stories. Tyler had heard the rumors, but never believed them. Ghost stories told to scare tourists, nothing more. He was scheduled to close up at midnight, collect the remaining tickets, lock the gates, and finally go home after 2 months of working weekends and nights. But the last group to enter the corn maze would never make it out. At 10:47 p.m., a group of 7 Ohio State students arrived, the final customers of the season. They were loud, excited, already filming everything on their phones for social media. They paid for the extreme maze experience, a 45-minute walk through the most difficult section of the corn maze, the part that wound through the oldest section of the farm where the original homestead once stood. Tyler watched them enter through the main gate, laughing and shoving each other, phones out to document the experience. They had until 11:30 p.m. to find the exit, standard procedure. At 11:45 p.m., Tyler realized they still hadn't emerged. What he found when he entered the maze to search for them would reveal a horrifying pattern. Tyler grabbed his flashlight and entered the maze alone, against protocol. But the farm owners had already left for the night, and Tyler didn't want to call them back for what was probably just some drunk college kids who'd gotten lost and were messing around. He followed the main path for 15 minutes, calling out for the students. No response. The corn stalks towered over him, blocking out the moonlight, creating shadows that seemed to move independently. Then he found the first phone, lying face up on the ground, in the middle of the path, still recording. The screen showed 2 hours and 18 minutes of footage. Then another phone. Then another. 7 phones total, each placed deliberately, forming a circle approximately 30 feet in diameter. All still recording. Battery levels showed they'd been there for almost an hour, but no students, no voices, no signs of struggle. Then he looked up at the corn stalks and saw something that made his blood freeze. Carved into the stalks surrounding the phone circle were symbols, crude, angular marks that looked ancient, deliberate, ritualistic. Tyler had seen these before, in a local history book about the farm that he'd flipped through during a slow shift. In 1872, 7 people disappeared during the harvest festival. Their bodies were found 3 days later, arranged in a circle in the cornfield, unconscious but alive, with no memory of what happened. The symbols carved around them matched what Tyler was seeing now, exactly. And that had been 148 years ago, October 31st, 1872. It was October 31st, 2020. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. Tyler heard rustling in the corn, not from the wind, but from movement, deliberate and synchronized. Then he saw them, the 7 students, emerging from between the stalks like sleepwalkers, their eyes open but unseeing, pupils dilated and black. They moved in perfect synchronization, stepping over their phones without looking down, converging on the center of the circle in a formation that looked rehearsed, mechanical. Tyler shouted at them, "Hey, what are you doing? Are you okay?" But they didn't react, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge his presence. They formed a circle, holding hands, and began swaying slightly, as if hearing music Tyler couldn't hear. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, they all collapsed simultaneously, falling to the ground in unison like marionettes whose strings had been cut. Tyler ran to check pulses, all alive, all breathing steadily. He called 911 at 11:59 p.m., his voice shaking as he tried to explain what he'd found. The police investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Paramedics arrived within 20 minutes and transported the students to the hospital. All 7 were physically fine. No injuries, no signs of drug use, vitals completely normal. But they had zero memory of the previous 3 hours. They remembered entering the maze, remembered the first turn, and then nothing until waking up in the hospital. Their phones had recorded everything, but the footage showed only darkness and a strange, rhythmic humming sound that audio forensics couldn't identify. It wasn't mechanical, it wasn't natural. It was something in between, hypnotic and ancient. Police searched the farm's historical records and discovered something the Blackwood family had hidden for generations. The disappearances happened every 74 years. 1872. 7 people disappeared, found unconscious 3 days later. 1946. 7 people disappeared, found the same way, same symbols, same date. 2020. 7 people, same symbols, same date. The pattern was undeniable. Records from 1872 described the victims as touched by the old gods of the harvest. Records from 1946 were sealed by the county, marked unexplained phenomenon. The Blackwood family had known but kept operating the farm, kept bringing people to that exact spot every Halloween, as if feeding something that lived in the soil. Blackwood Farms never reopened. The land was sold to a development company in early 2021, but construction crews refused to work there after equipment kept failing. Tractors stalling, chainsaws dying, electronic devices glitching, and displaying those same symbols on their screens. Workers reported hearing humming sounds in the field, especially at dusk, that made them feel disoriented and compelled to walk into the corn rows. The corn maze was burned to the ground in March 2021, but the symbols were found, carved into the charred remains, deeper and more numerous than before, as if the fire had revealed what had always been hidden beneath. Tyler quit and moved to Columbus, but he still has the photos of those symbols on his phone. He's tried deleting them dozens of times, but they reappear, sometimes rearranging themselves into new patterns. Sometimes, late at night, he hears that humming sound in his dreams, rhythmic, hypnotic, calling him back to the farm. He wakes up standing at his window, facing southeast, toward where Blackwood Farms used to be. The next occurrence is scheduled for 2094, based on the 74-year pattern. But Tyler has a terrible feeling it won't wait that long. Because last Halloween, October 31st, 2024, he received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of 7 people standing in a circle in a cornfield, and in the background, barely visible in the stalks, was Tyler's face, watching them. He'd never been to that location. He'd never seen those people. But somehow, he was there. And the humming in his dreams is getting louder. Story. The Mirror Selfie. Jasmine Torres stared at her phone screen, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped it. The Instagram photo she'd just posted showed her in the bathroom mirror at the Halloween party, smiling, holding up a peace sign. But there in the reflection, standing directly behind her left shoulder, was a face she'd never seen before. Pale, hollow-eyed, grinning. And she had been completely alone in that bathroom. But to understand how a social media influencer with 340,000 followers ended up deleting her entire online presence in a single night, we need to go back 6 hours. Jasmine Torres, a 21-year-old college senior and lifestyle influencer, loved Halloween. It was peak content season. Costumes, parties, spooky aesthetics that got massive engagement. On October 31st, 2023, she attended a massive Halloween party at a fraternity house near her university in Austin, Texas. She'd spent hours perfecting her vampire costume, complete with dramatic makeup and fangs. This was going to be her most viral night yet. What happened next would make her question everything about the digital world she'd built her life around. Around 9 p.m., Jasmine went to the upstairs bathroom to touch up her makeup and, of course, take some mirror selfies. The lighting was perfect, soft and flattering. She took 5 photos in various poses, checking each one before posting. They all looked great. She was alone in the bathroom, door locked, music thumping from downstairs. She posted the first photo to her Instagram story with the caption, "Vampire vibes," and a bat emoji. Within minutes, her phone started blowing up with notifications, but they weren't the usual heart emojis and flame reactions. They were comments, hundreds of them, all asking the same thing. "Who's behind you?" Jasmine's stomach dropped as she opened the photo and zoomed in. There, in the mirror's reflection, standing so close to her that they should have been touching, was someone else. A woman with long black hair, pale skin that looked almost gray, and eyes that were completely black. No whites, no iris, just darkness. She was smiling, but it was wrong, too wide, showing too many teeth. Jasmine spun around in the bathroom. Empty, completely empty. She looked back at the photo. The figure was still there, clearer now that she was looking for it. She quickly scrolled through the other 4 photos she'd taken in that bathroom. The figure appeared in all of them, but in different positions. In the first photo, it was far in the background, barely visible in the corner of the mirror. In the second, it had moved closer. Third photo, closer still. Fourth photo, right behind her. Fifth photo, the one she'd posted. It was pressed against her back, its face next to hers, both of them smiling at the camera. But what happened when she took one more selfie changed everything. Jasmine's breathing became rapid and shallow. With trembling hands, she opened her camera app and held up her phone to take another mirror selfie, this time specifically looking for the figure. She snapped the photo and immediately checked it. Her blood turned to ice. The figure was now in front of her in the reflection, between her and the mirror, facing her. Its black eyes stared directly into the camera lens. Jasmine screamed and dropped her phone. She grabbed the doorknob and fled the bathroom, nearly falling down the stairs in her panic to get away. She found her best friend Maya in the crowd downstairs and showed her the photos, her voice breaking as she tried to explain. Maya's face went pale. "Jazz, this is insane. We need to leave. Now." But Jasmine's followers had already started investigating. Someone recognized the bathroom. It was from a house where a woman named Elizabeth Crane had died in 2019. Elizabeth had been a college student, just like Jasmine, who'd become obsessed with social media and taking the perfect selfie. On Halloween night 2019, she'd locked herself in that bathroom for hours, taking hundreds of selfies, trying to get the perfect shot for her Instagram. When her friends finally broke down the door, they found her dead, phone still in her hand, camera app still open. The official cause of death was listed as a stroke, but her eyes had turned completely black, and her face was frozen in that too wide smile. Jasmine discovered all of this from her followers' comments, which kept flooding in. People sending her news articles, obituary links, photos of Elizabeth. And in every photo of Elizabeth, alive or dead, there was something in the background. Something with black eyes and a wrong smile. The same thing that was now appearing in Jasmine's photos. Then her phone buzzed with a new notification. Someone had tagged her in a post. It was one of her followers who'd screenshot Jasmine's Instagram story and posted it to Reddit. But when Jasmine looked at the screenshot, her heart stopped. The figure in the mirror was gone, and in its place was Jasmine herself, but a different Jasmine. This one had black eyes and that horrible, too wide smile. The caption on her original story had changed too. It now read, "Looking for my next reflection." Jasmine frantically opened her Instagram. The story was still there, but it had been edited somehow. Her face in the mirror looked wrong, distorted. Her smile was too wide. Her eyes were darkening. She tried to delete it, but the app froze. Then her phone started taking photos on its own. Click, click, click. The camera app had opened without her touching it, and it was capturing image after image, all selfies, all showing her with those black eyes, all showing her smile getting wider and wider. Jasmine powered off her phone completely, her hands shaking so badly she could barely press the button. Maya drove her home immediately, but the nightmare wasn't over. When Jasmine got back to her apartment and turned her phone back on to call her parents, all of her social media apps opened simultaneously. Her Instagram was posting photos she'd never taken, selfies of her sleeping, selfies of her in her apartment, selfies from angles that suggested someone else was holding the phone. Her followers were commenting in horror, asking if she was okay, if she'd been hacked. But Jasmine knew it wasn't a hack. The captions on these photos were things she'd never written. She's getting closer. Almost ready. The reflection is complete. At 3:47 a.m., Jasmine's phone took one final photo. It was a mirror selfie, but Jasmine wasn't holding the phone. The figure with black eyes was holding it, wearing Jasmine's exact costume, standing in Jasmine's exact apartment. And in the background of the photo, barely visible, was Jasmine herself, pale, hollow-eyed, fading, becoming the background presence that would appear in someone else's selfies. Jasmine deleted every social media account she had that night. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, everything. She smashed her phone with a hammer and threw it in a dumpster 3 blocks away. She transferred to a different university in a different state and changed her major from communications to accounting, something as far from social media as she could get. She uses a flip phone now, takes no photos, has no online presence whatsoever. But sometimes, her old followers still message her family, asking if she's okay. They send screenshots of photos they've taken, random selfies, mirror shots at parties, bathroom photos at clubs. And in the background, barely visible but definitely there, is a girl who looks exactly like Jasmine Torres used to look. Smiling, watching, getting closer with every photo, waiting for her next reflection. Story 7. The Delivery Driver. Kevin Wright pulled up to the address on his phone and felt his stomach drop. The house was abandoned, windows boarded up, yard overgrown, no lights, no cars, no signs of life. But his delivery app was pinging insistently, showing the order was active, the customer was waiting, and the timer was counting down. Then his phone buzzed with a new message from the customer. "Leave it at the red door. Don't look in the windows. Drive away immediately." He looked, and what he saw inside made him realize he was trapped in something impossible. 6 hours earlier, Kevin was just trying to make rent. Kevin Wright, 24, had been working as a food delivery driver in suburban Denver for 8 months, doing late-night shifts because the tips were better and there was less traffic. Halloween night 2022 was supposed to be busy and profitable. People ordering food for parties, staying in to watch horror movies, too lazy, or too drunk to cook. He'd already completed 9 deliveries by 11 p.m. and was hoping to knock out a few more before midnight. What happened on delivery number 10 would make him question the nature of reality itself. At 11:37 p.m., Kevin's phone pinged with a new order: cheeseburger, fries, large Coke, $42 including tip. The restaurant was close, but the delivery address was in a neighborhood Kevin didn't recognize: Ashwood Terrace, about 15 minutes outside the city. He picked up the food, checked that everything was in the bag, and plugged the address into his GPS. The drive started normal enough, but as he got farther from the city, the streets became darker, narrower, less maintained. He hadn't seen another car in 10 minutes. Then his phone buzzed. A message from the customer, just a phone number in the app system. No name. "Thank you for coming. Please follow instructions exactly." Kevin felt uneasy, but replied with a thumbs-up emoji. He needed the money. The GPS told him he was arriving at his destination, and that's when he saw the house. It was a 2-story colonial that looked like it had been abandoned for years. The siding was gray and peeling, the windows were boarded up with plywood, and the front yard was a jungle of overgrown weeds and dead bushes. There was no mailbox, no house number visible, but his GPS insisted this was the place. Then another message came through. "Leave it at the red door. Don't look in the windows. Drive away immediately." Kevin looked at the house again. There was a red door, faded and covered in scratches, barely visible in the darkness. His headlights illuminated it just enough. He grabbed the food bag, stepped out of his car, and walked quickly up the cracked driveway, every instinct screaming at him to get back in the car and leave. But he needed to complete the delivery to get paid. He needed the customer to confirm receipt. He approached the red door, set the bag down, took the required photo, and was about to turn back to his car when he heard something. A voice from inside the house, his own voice, saying his exact thoughts out loud. "Just leave it and get back to the car. This place is creepy as hell." Kevin froze. He stepped closer to one of the boarded windows, trying to find a gap to look through. The customer had told him not to look, but that voice, that was his voice. He found a crack between 2 boards and peered inside. What he saw made his blood turn to ice. Inside the abandoned house, lit by a single overhead bulb, was a living room that looked completely normal. Furnished, clean. And standing in the middle of that room, holding a food delivery bag identical to the one Kevin had just set down, was Kevin himself. Same jacket, same face, same confused expression. The Kevin inside the house was looking around, checking his phone, and then he turned and looked directly at the window where Kevin was standing outside. Their eyes met. Both of them screamed at the exact same time. Kevin stumbled backward, nearly falling over the overgrown weeds. He ran to his car, heart pounding, hand shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. As he started the engine, another message came through. "You looked. Now you have to deliver again." Kevin's phone pinged with a new order. Same address, same food. $42. He stared at the screen in horror. He hadn't confirmed the previous delivery. The app was telling him he still had an active order at this address, but he'd just delivered it. He'd just seen himself inside delivering it. His GPS recalculated, telling him to turn around and go back to the house. Kevin ignored it and drove away as fast as he could, tires screeching. But after 3 minutes of driving, his GPS announced he was arriving at his destination. He looked up. He was back at the abandoned house. The red door, the boarded windows. His previous delivery bag was gone from the doorstep. His phone buzzed. "Leave it at the red door. Don't look in the windows. Drive away immediately." Kevin checked his car's odometer. He'd driven 6.4 miles. But he was back at the starting point, as if he'd been driving in a circle, except the road had been completely straight. He tried to call his dispatcher, but his phone had no signal, except for the delivery app, which worked perfectly, showing him the active order, the countdown timer, the customer's messages. Panicking, Kevin got out of the car. He didn't remember grabbing another food bag, but there it was in his hand, the same order. He walked to the red door, set it down, took the photo, and this time he ran straight to the window and looked inside before he could talk himself out of it. The Kevin inside the house was setting down a food bag, walking toward the window, looking out. They saw each other again, but this time there were more. Behind the Kevin inside the house, Kevin could see another version of himself, and another, and another. A line of Kevins stretching back into the darkness of the house, all holding delivery bags, all looking confused and terrified. The nearest Kevin inside pressed his hand against the window from the inside, and Kevin pressed his hand against it from the outside. Their palms met through the glass, and Kevin felt the vibration of the other version pounding, trying to break through. Then his phone buzzed. The message read, "Some of you will make it out. Most won't. The house needs delivery drivers. It's been empty for so long." Kevin ran back to his car and drove. This time, after 7 miles, he ended up on a main road he recognized. The delivery app crashed. His phone signal returned. He was shaking so violently he had to pull over. He checked the delivery app history. The order to Ashwood Terrace showed as never delivered, customer canceled. But Kevin had delivered it. Multiple times. He'd seen himself delivering it. When he got home, he reported his car stolen and deleted the delivery app. He quit driving for food delivery services entirely and got a job at a warehouse where he never had to go to unfamiliar addresses. But 3 weeks later, he received a package at his apartment. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid photograph. It showed the abandoned house on Ashwood Terrace, the red door clearly visible. And in the window, barely visible through the boards, were faces. Dozens of faces pressed against the glass from inside. Kevin recognized some of them. Delivery drivers he'd seen at restaurants, people he'd nodded to while picking up orders. And in the center of the crowd, staring directly at the camera, was Kevin himself. On the back of the photo, written in handwriting that looked exactly like his own, was a message. Still making deliveries. Still trying to leave. Send help to Ashwood Terrace. We're all still here. Kevin burned the photograph, but sometimes late at night, his old delivery app reinstalls itself on his phone. An order pops up. $42. Ashwood Terrace. Cheeseburger, fries, large Coke, and a message from the customer. Thank you for coming back. We've been waiting. Story. 8. The voice message. Nina Okoye woke up to 17 missed calls from her own number. Her phone was right there on the nightstand, untouched. But according to her call log, she had been calling herself repeatedly between 3:47 a.m. and 4:15 a.m. And there was a voicemail from herself. Time-stamped 3:47 a.m. She pressed play and heard her own voice screaming for help, begging someone to come to 4026 Riverside Drive, saying she didn't have much time, that he was coming back. Nina had never been to 4026 Riverside Drive. She didn't even know where that was. But what she discovered when she drove there would connect her to a murder that happened 33 years before she was born. 18 hours earlier, Nina had been celebrating the end of a successful Halloween night. Nina Okoye, 29, worked as a podcast producer in Chicago, specializing in true crime content. Halloween 2019 had been her biggest recording day yet. 3 interviews with paranormal investigators, 2 with crime scene analysts, all scheduled back-to-back for a special Halloween series. She'd gotten home around 11 p.m., exhausted but satisfied, edited some audio files, and collapsed into bed around 1:30 a.m. She remembered setting her phone on the nightstand, plugging it in to charge, and falling asleep immediately. She definitely hadn't made any phone calls. What happened next would make her question everything she thought she knew about time, death, and the technology that connected them. Nina woke up at 7:15 a.m. to her alarm and immediately noticed the notification badges. 17 missed calls, all from her own number. All between 3:47 a.m. and 4:15 a.m. Her heart raced as she opened her phone. The call log was undeniable. Outgoing calls from her number, to her number, all lasting between 30 seconds and 2 minutes. But her phone had been right there, untouched, screen locked. Then she saw the voicemail notification. One new voicemail, received at 3:47 a.m. from her own number. Her hand trembled as she pressed play. What came through the speaker made her drop the phone. It was her voice. Absolutely, unmistakably her voice. Screaming, sobbing, desperate. "Please, if anyone gets this, I'm at 4726 Riverside Drive. He took me here. I don't know who he is. Please, send help. He's coming back. I can hear him. Oh God, he's coming back. My name is Nina Okoye. I'm 29 years old. Please tell my family." The message cut off abruptly, with a sound that might have been a door slamming or something worse. Nina sat frozen in her bed, her entire body shaking. She played it again. And again. That was her voice, her cadence, her way of speaking. But she'd been asleep, safe in her apartment. She immediately called her best friend Marcus, barely able to form coherent sentences as she explained what she'd found. Marcus came over within 20 minutes, and they listened to the voicemail together. His face went pale. "Nina, that's you. That's definitely you. How is that possible?" They called the police, non-emergency line, but the operator seemed confused and dismissive. Prank calls, she suggested. Or maybe Nina had recorded something while sleepwalking and forgotten about it. But Nina knew. She knew her own voice, her own terror. That wasn't a prank. That was real. And whoever that Nina was, she was begging for help at 4726 Riverside Drive. But the moment she typed that address into Google Maps, everything changed. The address existed. It was a house about 40 minutes outside Chicago, in a neighborhood Nina had never been to. But when she searched 4726 Riverside Drive, along with Nina Okoye, her stomach dropped. The first result was a news article from the Chicago Tribune, dated November 1st, 1989, 30 years ago. The headline read, "Woman found dead at 4726 Riverside Drive. Police investigating homicide." Nina clicked the article with shaking hands. The victim's name was Nina Marie Okoye, age 29, occupation, radio producer. The article described how she'd been reported missing after failing to show up for work on November 1st, 1989, the day after Halloween. Her body was discovered at an abandoned house at 4726 Riverside Drive 3 days later. She'd been held captive, tortured, and murdered. The killer was never found. The case went cold. Marcus stared at the screen, his face white. "Nina, this is insane. That's your name. That's your age. That's your job, basically." And she died at the address from the voicemail. Nina could barely breathe. She scrolled through more search results and found an old photo from the Tribune archives. Nina Marie Okoye, 1989. The woman in the photo looked exactly like her. Same face, same eyes, same smile. It was like looking at herself in vintage clothing. They drove to 4726 Riverside Drive immediately, even though Marcus begged her not to. The house was still there, abandoned and condemned, surrounded by a rusted chain-link fence with no trespassing signs. The windows were broken, the roof partially collapsed. Nina stood outside the fence, staring at the house where a woman with her exact name, her exact age, her exact face had died 30 years ago on Halloween night. And then her phone rang, incoming call from her own number. Nina answered, her voice barely a whisper. "Hello?" Static. Breathing. And then her own voice, distant and broken. "You came. Thank you for coming. But you're too late. You're always too late. He already has me. He already has you." He always will. The call ended. Nina tried to call back, but it went straight to a number that didn't exist. She checked her voicemail again. There were now 3 messages, all from 3:47 a.m., all from her own number. The second message was her voice saying, "I've been calling for 30 years. No one ever comes. Please don't let me die here again." The third message was just screaming. 2 minutes of raw, agonized screaming that sounded like it was being torn from her throat. Nina reported everything to the police, bringing Marcus as a witness, showing them the voicemails, the articles, the photos. The detective who took her statement looked visibly disturbed. He pulled the cold case file for Nina Marie Okoye's murder. According to the file, Nina Marie had left multiple frantic phone calls to her own apartment the night she was taken. But 1989, technology meant the calls just rang with no answer. She'd been trying to warn herself, trying to call for help, but there was no voicemail system back then. No way to leave a message. No way for anyone to know. She was calling herself, the detective said quietly, trying to warn herself. And now, somehow, those calls are reaching you. Nina never found out who killed Nina Marie Okoye in 1989. The case remains unsolved, but every Halloween since 2019, at exactly 3:47 a.m., Nina's phone receives a voicemail from her own number. Sometimes it's screaming, sometimes it's begging, sometimes it's just breathing. And once, on Halloween 2023, the message was different. It was her voice, calm and resigned. "I've been trapped here for 34 years, in this moment, in this place, and when you die, you'll be here too. We all will. Every Nina Okoye, every version. We're all calling for help, and no one ever comes." Nina moved to Seattle, changed her phone number 4 times, even changed her name legally to Nina Chen. But it doesn't matter. Every Halloween at 3:47 a.m., her phone rings. And it's always herself. Calling from 4726 Riverside Drive. Calling from 1989. Calling from a moment of terror that never ends, that loops forever, trapped in the space between the call going out and the call being received. And sometimes, late at night, Nina wonders, if she died tomorrow, would she be making those calls too? Would there be another Nina, somewhere in the future, waking up to voicemails from her own voice, begging for help that will never come? Story 9. The Children's Game. Rachel Mendez watched in horror as 7-year-old Emma Sullivan's eyes rolled back in her head, showing only whites, while the child chanted in a language that sounded older than any language Rachel had ever heard. The other children stood in a perfect circle around Emma, holding hands, swaying and repeating the same guttural sounds. This wasn't a game Rachel had taught them. No teacher at Wilson Elementary had taught them this. And when Emma finally opened her eyes and looked at Rachel, she smiled with too many teeth and said in a voice that wasn't her own, "The Harvest King is pleased with our offering." Then one of the children in the circle simply vanished. Just gone, as if he'd never been there at all. 8 hours earlier, Rachel had been excited about the school's Halloween carnival. Rachel Mendez, a 32-year-old third-grade teacher, loved Halloween almost as much as her students did. Wilson Elementary School in rural Pennsylvania held an annual Halloween carnival every October 31st. Games, costumes, candy, face painting, the works. Parents volunteered, kids ran around in costumes, and it was always Rachel's favorite day of the school year. This year, 2020, the carnival was smaller due to COVID restrictions, held outdoors in the school field with only students and essential staff. But the kids were thrilled just to have some normalcy, some fun. Rachel arrived early to help set up, wearing a witch costume that made her students giggle. What happened next would make her quit teaching and move 3 states away. Around 4 p.m., as the carnival was in full swing, Rachel noticed a group of about 12 children, all between ages 6 and 8, gathered in a circle near the far end of the field, away from the main activities. At first, she assumed they were playing Ring Around the Rosie or some other circle game. But something about their movements seemed off, too synchronized, too deliberate, too ritualistic. She walked over to check on them, and that's when she heard the chanting. The children were holding hands in a perfect circle, swaying side to side and chanting words Rachel didn't recognize. Not English, not Spanish, not any language she could identify. The sounds were guttural, harsh, ancient-sounding. "Kids, what are you playing?" Rachel asked, trying to sound cheerful despite the unease crawling up her spine. None of them answered. They didn't even look at her. They just kept chanting, kept swaying. Rachel recognized most of them. Emma Sullivan, Michael Chen, Sophia Rodriguez, others from various classes. Good kids. Normal kids. But right now, they looked like something else entirely. But what the children said next made Rachel's blood run cold. Emma, still in the center of the circle, suddenly stopped chanting. The other children continued, but Emma stood perfectly still, head tilted at an unnatural angle, eyes still showing only whites. Then she spoke, but it wasn't Emma's voice. It was deeper, older, wrong. "The Harvest King requires his tribute. We have been taught the old ways. We remember what the adults forgot." Rachel stepped forward, trying to break through the circle, but the children holding hands wouldn't budge. They were impossibly strong, their small hands gripping each other with a force that didn't match their size. "Emma, sweetheart, this isn't funny. You need to stop this right now," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "Where did you learn this game?" Emma's head slowly rotated toward Rachel, still at that wrong angle, and she smiled. Too many teeth, far too many teeth for a 7-year-old's mouth. "No one taught us. We remembered. The ground remembers. The field remembers. We walk on bones, Teacher Rachel. We play on graves. The Harvest King has been waiting." Then one of the children in the circle, Michael Chen, wearing a Spider-Man costume, simply wasn't there anymore. 1 second, he was holding hands with 2 other children, chanting with the group. The next second, the 2 children were holding each other's hands across an empty space, as if Michael had never been between them. They didn't react, didn't look confused, didn't break the circle. They just kept chanting. Rachel screamed and ran toward the circle, but the moment she got within 3 feet, she felt a force push her backward, like hitting an invisible wall. She stumbled and fell, her witch hat flying off. Other teachers and parents were starting to notice now, starting to move toward the strange circle of chanting children. But they couldn't get close either. Whatever surrounded those kids was keeping the adults out. Then the chanting stopped. All at once, the children released each other's hands and blinked, looking around confused. Emma's eyes returned to normal, brown, innocent, 7 years old. The children scattered, running back to their parents, laughing and asking for candy, as if nothing had happened. Except Michael Chen. Michael was gone. Rachel stumbled to her feet and grabbed Emma by the shoulders. "Emma, where's Michael? What just happened? Where did you learn that game?" Emma looked up at her with genuine confusion. "What game, Miss Mendez? We were just playing tag. Is it time for the costume contest?" She didn't remember. None of them remembered. Rachel asked every child who'd been in that circle. All of them had the same blank, confused response. They'd been playing tag. They'd been getting snacks. They'd been with their parents. None of them remembered standing in a circle. None of them remembered chanting. And worse, none of them remembered Michael Chen. When police arrived and started interviewing children and parents, asking about the missing boy, the kids looked confused. "Who's Michael Chen?" they asked. "Is he new?" But Rachel remembered. She remembered Michael Chen. He'd been in her class 2 years ago. Sweet kid, loved dinosaurs, always raised his hand. He was real. She had photos of him in her classroom. She had his old assignments, her files. But when she went to find them the next day, they were gone. His name was erased from the school records. His desk in his current classroom was occupied by a different student, a student everyone insisted had been there all year. Michael Chen's parents didn't exist. The address on file led to an empty lot. It was as if Michael had been erased from reality, and only Rachel could remember he'd ever existed. The investigation revealed something that made Rachel want to burn the school to the ground. Police brought in ground-penetrating radar to scan the field where the children had been playing. They found bones, dozens of them. Children's bones, buried between 3 and 5 feet deep, arranged in circular patterns beneath the surface. Carbon dating revealed they were over 200 years old. The field had been a burial ground long before the school was built, before the town existed. Records from the 1700s described a settlement that practiced harvest offerings to ensure good crops, offerings that involved children. The settlement had been abandoned after the entire adult population mysteriously died overnight, leaving only empty houses and small footprints in the dirt, as if the children had walked away into the forest and never returned. And carved into the oldest bones they found, they discovered symbols. The same symbols that Emma had drawn in her notebook during class the week before Halloween, drawings Rachel had dismissed as random doodles. The children had somehow accessed memories buried in the land itself, learned rituals that predated written history in that region, and performed them with perfect accuracy. Michael Chen was never found. The FBI investigated for months. No body, no trace, no family to even mourn him because his family never existed. Rachel was the only person who remembered him, and eventually even she started to doubt her own memories. Had there really been a Michael Chen? Or had her mind created him as a way to process whatever she'd witnessed that day? Rachel quit teaching 2 weeks after the carnival. She moved to Oregon, as far from Pennsylvania as she could get, and now works from home as a freelance writer. She avoids children. She avoids schools. She avoids anywhere with old ground, old land, places where history might be buried deep enough to remember. But every Halloween, she receives a drawing in the mail. No return address, just a child's crayon drawing of a circle of stick figures holding hands, and one figure in the center with too many teeth. At the bottom, written in a child's handwriting, is always the same message. The Harvest King says thank you, Teacher Rachel. See you next year. Story 10. The Last Video. Claire Patterson sat in the police interrogation room, watching the video for the 100th time. There on the screen, clear as day, were 2 people entering Nightmare Manor, the extreme haunted house attraction in Columbus, Ohio. Claire on the left, Beth on the right. Both laughing, both excited, both very much real. But Claire came out alone, and when the detective asked, "Who's the woman with you in this video?" Claire looked at him like he was insane and said, "I went in alone. I've always been alone. Who are you talking about?" That's when the detective realized something was very wrong with this video, with this case, with reality itself, because Beth Morrison had vanished. And according to everyone except this footage, she'd never existed at all. 14 hours earlier, best friends Claire and Beth were looking forward to the scariest night of their lives. Claire Patterson and Beth Morrison, both 26, had been best friends since middle school. They'd moved to Columbus together after college, shared an apartment, finished each other's sentences, the kind of friendship that felt like family. Halloween 2021 was supposed to be their night. They'd been planning it for months. Nightmare Manor, the most extreme haunted house in Ohio, the one you had to sign a waiver to enter, the one people claimed was so intense that over 30% of participants used the safe word to get out early. Claire and Beth arrived at 7 p.m., waited in line for an hour, signed their waivers, and decided to film the whole experience on Beth's phone for their social media. They'd been vlogging their friendship for years. 400,000 followers on TikTok, 200,000 on Instagram. This was going to be epic content. What happened in the next 47 minutes would destroy everything Claire thought she knew about reality. The video started normally. Beth held the phone in selfie mode, showing both their faces as they waited in line. "Okay, guys, we're about to enter Nightmare Manor," Beth said, grinning. "Claire is already scared, and we haven't even gone in yet." Claire laughed, pushing Beth playfully. "I'm not scared. You're scared." They bantered back and forth, the way best friends do. Other people in line photobombed their video. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m. when they finally reached the entrance. A dark doorway with fake fog pouring out and strobe lights flashing. They stepped inside together, Beth still filming, both of them screaming and laughing as actors in grotesque costumes jumped out at them. The video continued, shaky and chaotic, showing both of their faces periodically as they moved through various horror-themed rooms. At the 23-minute mark, they entered a room with mirrors, a disorienting maze where every wall reflected infinite versions of themselves. This is where everything changed. In the video, you can see them get separated. Claire goes left around a mirrored corner. Beth goes right. Beth's voice on the recording. "Claire? Where'd you go?" "Claire." Claire's voice, distant. "I'm over here. Follow my voice." Then Beth turns a corner in the mirror maze, and the camera shows her walking alone through a hallway that gets progressively darker. She's calling for Claire, but there's no response now. The video shows Beth walking for about 3 minutes through increasingly disturbing rooms, actors that get too close, lights that flicker and die, sounds of crying and screaming that seem too real. Then, at the 29-minute mark, Beth walks into a room that's completely black. The camera captures nothing but darkness for 15 seconds. Then her scream. Not a fun Halloween scream, a real scream, a terrified, desperate scream. The video cuts off. The next footage is from 7 minutes later, time-stamped 9:23 p.m. It's Claire, outside the exit of Nightmare Manor, doubled over and crying. Someone is asking if she's okay. A staff member is there with a flashlight. "I'm okay," Claire says on the video. "I'm fine. I used the safe word. It was too intense. I need to sit down." The staff member asks, "Were you here alone?" "Yeah," Claire responds. "I came by myself. I need some water." The video ends there. Beth's phone was found 3 days later in the lost, and found at Nightmare Manor, still fully charged, with this complete 36-minute video stored in the camera roll. But here's the thing. When police showed Claire the video, showed her the footage of her and Beth entering together, of them laughing and joking and clearly together, Claire had no memory of it. No memory of Beth being there. No memory of Beth at all. "I don't know who that is," Claire said, staring at the screen. "That's not real. I went to Nightmare Manor alone on Halloween. I've never seen that woman before in my life." The police thought she was in shock, or lying, or covering something up. They investigated Beth Morrison's disappearance, except they couldn't find any evidence that Beth Morrison existed. The apartment Claire swore they shared. Claire had been living there alone for 3 years, according to the landlord. The TikTok account they ran together. It was just Claire's account, always had been. 400,000 followers watching videos of Claire talking to herself, doing challenges alone, responding to comments as if she were two people. Except the comments clearly showed people responding to both Claire and Beth. "You two are hilarious," one comment read. Beth's reaction at 2:47 is everything, read another. The comments referenced Beth, hundreds of them. But when investigators looked at the actual videos, it was just Claire. Alone. The forensic analysis of the Nightmare Manor video revealed something that made seasoned detectives physically ill. Beth's face in the video glitched, barely noticeable unless you went frame by frame, but it was there. Every third or fourth frame, Beth's face would distort, pixelate, blur, sometimes disappear entirely, leaving just Claire laughing and talking to empty air. But the audio was consistent. Beth's voice was there, clear and real, responding to Claire, making jokes, screaming when they were scared. Her voice never glitched, just her image. The video analysis expert told police, "It's like she was there and not there at the same time. Like she was being erased in real time, but incompletely. I've never seen anything like this." Nightmare Manor was investigated top to bottom. They reviewed their security footage from Halloween night 2021. It showed Claire entering alone at 8:47 p.m. It showed her moving through the rooms alone, talking to herself, laughing at nothing. It showed her screaming and using the safe word in the mirror maze, and staff escorting her out. No Beth, no second person. But Beth's phone recorded something different, and the other guests who were in line with them, when police tracked them down and showed them photos of Claire and Beth, some of them said, "Yes, I remember them. Two friends, both excited, making videos." Others looked confused and said, "I only remember one girl. She was alone. I felt bad for her." Claire's family was interviewed. They had no idea who Beth Morrison was. Claire had never mentioned a best friend named Beth. Claire had never mentioned a roommate. When detectives asked Claire's mother about Beth, she looked genuinely confused. "Claire's always been a bit of a loner," she said. "She has friends, but no one super close." Why? But Claire's phone told a different story. Text conversations with Beth, going back 7 years. Thousands of photos together. Travel photos, birthday photos, just hanging out photos. Except in every photo, Beth's face had that same glitch, that same frame-by-frame distortion, like she was phasing in and out of existence. Beth Morrison was never found. The missing person case remains open, but there's no evidence she ever existed, except for that video, those photos, those comments from people who sometimes remembered her and sometimes didn't. Claire lives alone now. She deleted all her social media, the followers, the videos, everything. She refuses to watch the footage from Nightmare Manor anymore. She sees a therapist 3 times a week, trying to make sense of memories that contradict reality, trying to understand how she can remember 13 years of friendship with someone who apparently never existed. But sometimes, late at night, Claire's phone buzzes with a text from a blocked number. The messages are always the same. "I'm still in the mirror maze. I've been here for 3 years. Why did you leave me? Why can't you remember me? I can see you, Claire. I can see you living the life we were supposed to live together. Why am I the only one who remembers?" And every Halloween since 2021, at exactly 9:16 p.m., the timestamp when Beth walked into that completely black room in the video, Claire's phone starts recording on its own. When she plays back the footage the next morning, it's just darkness and audio. Beth's voice, screaming, crying, calling Claire's name, begging someone to remember her, to prove she existed, to come back and find her in the darkness where she's been trapped since that Halloween night when reality decided she was never supposed to be real at all.